Today's topic, it's a really exciting one. We have a great panel of OSPO practitioners. But before that, let's move to OSPO news during the month. Short story of why are we doing OSPOlogy. In the tutor community, we always say, your OSPO is not my OSPO. There is not a broad template to build an OSPO. And that's why the need of sharing public knowledge and bringing together a community to build resources on how to start an OSPO or talk about specific problems. That's why we are having these OSPOlogy discussions every month, bringing different perspectives of open source leaders across the globe. And we are proud to keep advancing and helping on this open source from office adoption, education across regions and sectors. Last year, we did great improvements, collaborating with other open source projects to enhance this collaboration and build new initiatives together. Also creating new guides to improve contributions and participation guidelines in the community, and also ensure geographical availability. Make sure that we are hearing the voices of OSPO teams and OSPO leaders across the globe, enhancing these local discussions. We are having the next OSPOlogy Live Europe, and this time is going to be in the Netherlands. OSPO at Alliander is hosting those, so we are really excited. This is a collaborative effort between different open source organizations. It's not just about to-do, it's also representatives coming from OpenSSF, Inner Source Commons, Elf Energy, XPDX, OpenChain, Chaos. And the agenda of this OSPOlogy session, OSPOlogy Live Europe session, will be more focused on open source for public organizations and the energy sector. And we will be having also breakout room people moderating and leading those conversations, great open source leaders coming from different open source communities. We are also great to see how OSPO local communities keeps evolving. The OSPO local meetup at Helsinki is organizing their second meetup next week as well. So if you're living in Helsinki or you're nearby, feel free to check it out. Also, we are always welcoming new contributors, and there are many ways you can contribute to the OSPOlogy repo. That is not just about gathering together and sharing knowledge, but also creating new initiatives, creating new documentations that help OSPOs to accelerate and to be adopted in different areas and scopes. There are many ways to contribute, as I said, translating documentations, contribute to code, and so on. And for that, we have specific meetings, the OSPOlogy working hours, or you can also check specific working groups that happens monthly. We are currently having active 2 working groups, but if there is someone that would like to start a new working group on a specific topic, feel free to share this proposal in the community. And for those who cannot make it to this OSPOlogy session until the end, or if you knew someone that really wanted to attend but they couldn't, no worries. I mean, the panel discussion is going to be recorded, and we always publish that in our OSPOlogy YouTube channel. What is not going to be recorded is the last minute discussions, because that will be under Chatham House rules. So once we move to the Q&A, these are not going to be recorded. You can share the information you receive, but you cannot say who said it. So saying this, let's move to the topic of the month. Today's topic is really interesting discussion on how OSPOs manage change in enterprises. January's moderator is going to be Flor Dress, developer advocate at Avian, and also she's really highly engaging in the OSPO at Avian as well.
My name is Flor Drees. I'm a staff developer advocate at Ivan. And yes, during the pre-chat, I called myself an honorary member of the Ivan OSPO. And I think Josep was on mute, so he couldn't disagree. Anyway, hello, everyone. I'm so glad to do this panel. Super interesting topic. I'm going to introduce all of the panelists real quick because we don't have a lot of time, but I assure you they gave me ample information about their hobbies and their pets and their children. They're all-rounded humans, not only great professionals. So I want to start with Leslie. Leslie is a senior manager vertical industries communities at Red Hat Open Source Program Office. That is a mouthful, and previously worked at Google and Elastic. You're Californian born and raised in Silicon Valley, but now a happy resident of Europe since 2014, and we're also very happy for it. Then we have Emma Irwin, who is a Principal Technical Program Manager at the Microsoft Open Source Program Office and previously a Staff Program Manager at Mozilla. Hey, Emma. Then we have Jan Schenk, who is the OSPO lead at Postman, previously at Microsoft, where we were colleagues. I missed that time. Jan is a diversity, equity, and inclusion, accessibility, and tech community advocate by heart that is based in Germany. Alyssa, the Bloomberg Open Source Office in the Chief Technology Office is the Center of Excellence for Bloomberg's engagement and consumption of open source software. And in the center of that center is Alyssa. Alyssa is also the former Director of Community and Partnerships at Open Collective and a former board member for OpenStreetMap in the US. And then last but not least, Josep joins us as well as the Open Source Engineering Director at Ivan and an Apache Kafka committer. Josep is a Java and Scala aficionado who's also based in Germany. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
Hello there.
Hi, Fleur.
So I promise I want to dive right into the discussion because, again, we don't have so much time. So let's, in the order that I've just introduced you, and we'll see if you remember, talk about why your company has an OSPO to begin with.
I'm actually really excited that you introduced me first because Red Hat is kind of a strange animal in terms of its open source strategy and why we have an OSPO. So Red Hat as an organization has been in business for almost 30 years now, and obviously the software that we've published has been open source since day one. So traditionally, OSPOs have a function to understand kind of like where do we decide what will be open sourced and what is our process for making those decisions. Clearly, that's not part of Red Hat's strategy. So the group was formed originally to focus on what is Red Hat's relationship with its various upstream communities, so the communities that feed into our product line, and also to really be able to share the knowledge that the organization had built up within its firewall and its employees' experience, having had that open source since day one process. So we're really about sharing best practices, collaborating within the community, and our team, as well as myself personally, have really taken it as one of our responsibilities to help others to come into the community and to be able to do the same sort of work that we've been doing for a very, very long time. So less about license compliance, much more about growing the ecosystem and making sure that we can share the lessons we've learned with others. Thanks, Fleur.
Awesome. Emma, you're next. Did I remember it correctly? Yes, I did.
Yes, you did. I thought I was second. I think I'm second. Thanks, Fleur. So why does Microsoft have an OSPO? Kind of predates me, like the origin story of that, but I would say that we have an OSPO right now and we'll continue to invest in that just because it's so important to many of the things that Leslie just said, like building that the community internally that helps us understand and embrace our responsibility to the ecosystem, engineering practices, ensuring great innovation through open source. But Microsoft specifically, like when I was at Mozilla, the origin story of Mozilla was like David versus Goliath, where like Goliath was Microsoft and how Mozilla and Open won. And I like to think that that's less of a battle between two organizations in the beginning, but more that Open won. And so in recognition of that, like Microsoft has, and OSPO is a great way to authentically engage in that that reality that Open won. Open is central to engineering practices. Unifying those across a company, the policies, procedures just can only help an organization. And so OSPO, our OSPO, is exists across the organization. And so I'll just say it's to kind of to be a part of that and to do it well.
Love that. Jan, you're up next.
That was me. Yeah, I remember.
Yes.
So at Postman, to answer the question, hopefully brief, at Postman, it was a wild thing because we did a lot of open source contribution, and even I feel like when I learned about To-Do Group and the maturity models, I found that Postman was very late in the maturity model. Like employing contributors to projects, open source projects that were strategically important to Postman, but didn't provide any structure at all. We do have, like, Open Technologies is the department within Postman that is the container for those projects, really. But that container didn't like do anything that a OSPO does. So provide structure, support, lower barriers, make connections within the company, etc. So that was like the opportunity that I saw back in September last year, and well, pitched to call a spade and make it an OSPO. And that's when we like started the journey. So yeah, that's our level.
I think I'm next on the docket.
Sure.
Like Emma, the OSPO at Bloomberg predates me. I'm not part of its origin story per se. We've had an OSPO for about 10 years now. And I think it has originated, I think, quite practically, because we were using a lot of open source software in our stack, and so the opportunity of being able to contribute and lead in those open source like communities and projects that we were leveraging. And so the OSPO helps to like reduce the friction of both the use, but also the contribution and leadership in these open source ecosystems, and like matrix throughout like the entire organization. And I'll pass the baton to Joseph.
Hi, thank you. So I'm one of those ones that technically I think the OSPO predates me, but only by 1 month, and only if you count one person a team. So that's the strange thing, right? So I mean, if we call it a team, at least 2 people, then when I joined, we formed the OSPO in that sense. The OSPO at Ivan is also one of the, paraphrasing Leslie as well, one of the strange ones as well. So what we do is basically focus on contributing to third-party open source projects. Ivan offers open source projects as a service. So you can go to Ivan and click a button and you get some open source projects as a service, like Kafka, like Postgres, and so on. So what we do, we employ people to contribute to those projects. So one of the reasons why the OSPO at Ivan exists is because we want to make sure that the projects that Ivan relies on are secured, they are safe, and they are there to keep their way and to be healthy and sustainable for the long run. And now back to you, Flor.
Thank you. It's like a news show. Appreciate it. And Jan also posted in the chat that your OSPO may vary. And I think I've heard this, the number of times that I've heard people say like, yes, we have an OSPO, but it's not like any other OSPO. It's like, maybe
we should stop saying that, because they all vary, right?
They're all unique snowflakes, and we love them equally. And I'm also curious, for the ones that sort of started the practice of an OSPO at their companies, and I think this goes for you too, Josep, because like a month is that's not even that's not even a life form really yet. But how did you have to convince the rest of the organization that contributing to open source or having structure around open source is important? And if so, how did you manage to do that? So I think that goes for Josep and Jan specifically.
So Jan, you want to start, or shall I go
first?
Yes,
please.
Okay, so the idea of the OSPO was originated by one of the 2 co-founders at Ivan. So my convincing was easy, as in that was the guidelines we got. Do something in that space. What, how, and what are the guidelines? That was the thing that we needed to come up with. So it was not so much about convincing, but putting the things around the team and the guidelines around the teams and the mission and vision specifically for those teams, so they could be successful in the future, and we could evaluate, are we doing a good job? What do we need to improve? What do we need to change? And what is our impact? So all this thing was what needed to be defined, and obviously that needed to be approved. So given the directive that was make the open source projects that we rely on better, we need to derive guidelines and strategies. And those ones in the end were always fundamentally going and trying to answer one question. Are those actions we are doing making the project that we want to be more sustainable? If that's a yes, then we are doing a good job. If the answer is we don't know, we need to rethink that. And if the answer is no, then obviously that was the wrong thing. What about you, Jan?
So it's obvious that at Postman there was already like a strong support for open source projects. Otherwise, you wouldn't like hire, I don't know what the biggest group of people was, like I think 12 or so, 12 people to work full time on an open source project. That's like, you have to believe in that. Otherwise, you wouldn't pay for it. So that wasn't the issue. It was also not an issue to offer structure and processes. It's been quite a vacuum where I came in and said, well, this is what I could offer to create for all of you. Would you like that? And some people were like, I don't mind. It's not super important. Most people were like, yeah, I'm craving for this. I'd love to have guardrails. I'd love to know what is okay to do and what isn't. Sometimes I'd like to compare an open source policy at a company with a code of conduct. Like you don't need it as long as nothing happens, as long as people don't have questions, as long as there's no incidents. But once there is the first even minor incident, you would wish that there was one from the beginning. So that's basically what I'm trying to do right now, is creating open source policy, providing structure, lowering barriers for people. And it's probably the least part of the job at the moment is advocating for open source, because people want to do this. That's the situation at Postman.
Perfect. And just a small addition to that, I think also people are looking for support and those guardrails, and the expertise that we're able to bring, like collectively as a community, I think is welcome, or at least that has been like a lot of the response that I get. I mean, so it is a somewhat of a confusing time, I think, for like, you know, technology stacks and where open source fits into it. And I think that being like spaces of excellence, of expertise, to be able to support, reduce risk, and, you know, create those guardrails, and do that in like legally, you know, legal ways, is important.
Perfect. I want to continue on that. I would love to hear from the panelists. How did you actually go about introducing those processes to unify and maybe finally manage existing open source contributions within the company? Maybe Alyssa, you can start.
Sure. So when you say unify, I will say it constantly looks like it's never finished. Yes, the journey. The destination is the journey, or however that's said. So, but like, I think, and this is in the origin of the OSPO at Bloomberg. So this didn't necessarily start with me, but what we did that I think we've been moving forward with, and it's been quite successful, is to incorporate it into existing processes. And so we had like existing policies, existing processes to do other things within Bloomberg. And so it became like another piece to everything from the training to the requests, like the managerial approval requests. And so having it be part of like the entire, you know, administrative infrastructure of one's experience at Bloomberg has been really important, for having the process be just always process and like unification always there. I think another thing that we've been doing most recently is having, I keep calling it like a matrix leadership, that we have people throughout the organization who aren't necessarily, you know, full-time on the OSPO team, but rather are like our bridges to all these like more local communities and technology communities. And that has been like really important to have that type of expertise and resources like spread broadly throughout the organization. I'll pass it to Emma or to somebody else.
You're taking my job away from me, Lisa. But I agree with you, because I would love to hear from Emma and Leslie both, because working at a super large organization, I'd be interested in how that works.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about the word unification of contribution doesn't quite land, but I can definitely talk about how we work and think about contribution, which is central. So we're always, this is something that we talk about and teach. Teaching is a big part of it, that the upstream contributing to open source is central and core to engineering practices and not separate or extra, trying to kind of drill in that kind of attitude and culture. Also, I'll say that we have like the policies that support contribution. So, small bug fixes that we really try and get out of the way of people who just want to, like contribute something small or bring something to a project that they've created, and to make sure that we're sharing back. But also, if there's bigger contributions or people want to create longer lasting relationships with open source projects, we have a policy and procedure for that. And that's not about like, should we contribute or not? It's like, let us look at the CLA, let us, figure out all the things that we need to consider for you. And then, let's take all that worry away from you. You can just go and work on this project now. So that's a big part of what we try and do, is pull away any barriers and like help people feel like they can be successful, and they don't have to keep checking, that kind of thing. I don't know how other OSPOs are, but sometimes people might feel like, oh, the OSPOs involved, they're going to be like checking us, but actually we're trying to do the opposite and really like empower people. So that kind of policy and process is really central for contribution. We also do a lot of storytelling. We talk about projects that, how they've, managed to accelerate their innovation, how people want to work with that team, kind of like making Microsoft and specific teams a place that people who are out in those communities want to work and want to be. And then I'll also say that the FOSS Fund that we run is it's just one of our ways that we give back. Certainly not the only way, but in order to vote on the FOSS Fund, you have to have contributed to open source in the last 2 months. So we try and motivate folks to just kind of participate in those. And then finally, at Microsoft, one of the core pillars of like our review process is building on the work of others, so that people can come back to their manager discussions and say, I built on the work of others, like this is something that I did and it actually matters to their career. So those are just a few different ways that I can think of that we incentivize and kind of unify that. Similar to Leslie, we also have what Leslie mentioned about community and expertise. We have our open source champs program, which are people who opt in to help each other. So making people find a ball around, like, how do I contribute to this project? What's the community like? Getting people those answers sooner rather than later has been important too.
All right, I'll go ahead and jump in with a follow-up. And in terms of Red Hat's OSPO and our entropy reduction process, because there's definitely no unification of development. The OSPO was created about 10 years ago, and at that time, Red Hat was a much smaller organization. This was also, of course, pre-acquisition by IBM. And, we did not have what I would call a lot of processes in place, because people were just getting their jobs done. Things were going well. The organization was making money. We were attracting top talent. You just keep going along as you're going. And when the OSPO came in, we wanted to institute some amount of hygiene, just so we had visibility into what everyone was working on and how it was valued, and also to make sure folks had support in having their work valued as part of their promotion criteria, not just contributing to core products, but also to dependencies, et cetera. And we really were able to roll that out through the organization by really leveraging our employees' pride in their contribution and their pride in their community engagement. So actually getting folks to let us know that there was an upstream here somewhere in a random repository or somewhere here in their own, personal GitHub repo, and getting it migrated over into our Red Hat official GitHub repository so we could keep an eye on what was happening. It was just a matter of letting them know that we were going to spotlight them. We were going to give them a contributor badge. We were going to be, talking about them at conference presentations, et cetera, and really just reinforcing something that was already a cultural value in our organization about the value of contribution and celebrating your contributions to get people to come along with processes that were really just bottom line beneficial to the business in terms of understanding what software assets were out there, where people were spending their time, et cetera. And then the other ways in which we've been able to sort of roll out those practices internally has looked like having a close relationship with our legal team so that we together cannot be the collective department of no. We can collectively be the department of that's a great idea and here's what we need you to do so that that great idea can come to fruition. Working with our people team so that as part of our new hire orientation, we're able to communicate processes and best practices to folks right when they come in the door, especially as we've hired more and more folks from technical backgrounds and also into other non-software development functions who may not have that background over time. So we really just try to be an open door of supportive, welcoming humans who make it very clear that we're here to help you be successful in your quest, no matter where the eventual destination of that quest is, and working through influence and just being available to our staff. And each time we ask them to do something a little bit differently, we make it very clear what the benefits are for them and meet them where they are as well.
Perfect. I love the celebrating contributions. That's wonderful. We have a couple of questions from the audience, and so it's a little bit of a different course, but we're going to go for it anyway because we're glad that people joining us today. So one of the question is, how does the U.S. new executive order around providing software bills of materials for open source components in use affect OSPOs? And I think maybe a question that goes before that is that if the OSPO even owns an SBOM, whoever wants to take it first, we're going in no particular order right now. Joseph is putting up both hands, so
I can take this one. It's an easy no. We don't own the SBOM, so it's a really easy thing. Security owns the SBOM at Ivan, and also because of we take it also from a security standpoint, not so much also about as a what our dependencies type, but also where things might be breaking and where we need to pay attention to. So yes, I know that some OSPOs do need to take care on generating OSPOs. I've seen already in the chat Thomas saying hi. If you have questions about SBOMs, talk to Thomas. He's great at that. But that's one of the things that, yes, sometimes OSPOs need to do that. Sometimes it's other teams like security, for example.
We're in
something that we. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. I'm going to stop now.
I just a small comment that I was going to say is that I think it is important to have a good bridge with security. Wherever, whether that's your domain or it's a different team, because clearly it is a priority for all of us that are thinking about open source projects, and it may not be our direct domain, but I appreciate all of the dialogue that I have with the security team specifically.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. At Red Hat's OSPO as well, we don't have responsibility for the SBOM, but part of being an active and engaged open source program office from our perspective is really being that connective tissue, not only with contributors and collaborators outside of the firewall, but also different groups within the organization who are all stakeholders in different processes and which will have different impacts across different teams. So we have an excellent relationship with our security team. We are there to be of help to them in their quest when it is required, but we don't actually have purview over the SBOM question within our office.
I think there's a follow-up question, or almost like a follow-up question from one of the attendees, where it's, but what about dependency management and looking after the health of some of the things that we depend on, and that maybe that's rather what falls into the OSPOs bucket. I see violent nodding, so yes.
Would you like non-violent words to accompany violent nodding?
To go along with those. Yes, yeah, that would be good.
Excellent. Absolutely, it is one of the key components of Red Hat's OSPO that we're looking into the long-term health and sustainabilities of projects and communities upon which Red Hat depends. And we have a wide variety of ways in which we support those communities, and a wide variety of ways in which we look to understand if that community is healthy and is long-term sustainable. For folks who may be attending the Chaos Conference coming up a couple weeks from now in Brussels, you can hear from some of my colleagues about the work we're doing in something called Project Aspen in order to measure health and sustainability in open source projects. And Red Hat has also taken an active role in supporting open source project communities that were not necessarily a core part of our product offering, but when the pandemic hit and the FOSS Responders Fund was created, we were both funders of that and had several employees in our OSPO who were actively engaged in that community to make sure that our entire ecosystem could be sustainable in the face of that change.
I also would like to mention,
yeah,
because there was
if
a
anyone
question.
wants to continue on that sort of trend, or maybe broader how it's decided what upstream projects are being contributed to, then please go ahead.
Yeah, so I would like to continue on that one. So there is also a sub-question from Giovanni that says, should I pay attention to only to direct dependencies, or the transitive ones are also equally important? The answer is yes, they are equally important. And sometimes even more important, because sometimes those are the ones that break. Hi, Log4j. So now it's a year ago, but that was usually a transitive dependency, not a first level dependency of yours. And those one also break. So yes, we need to pay attention to all of those ones. Also, if we take a look at criticality scoring, which, for example, the OSSF has a nice project to calculate those. That's really important to know how critical those projects are, but we need to also take care of what Leslie was pointing towards, is like their fragility state, or in which delicate state they are, how low is the bus factor, for example. And those projects also need to be looked at. And again, those ones usually are not on your maybe direct dependencies, they might be your transitive dependencies. And answering also another way of deciding which projects contribute to, for example, in our case, it's pretty easy. Ivan offers a thin layer of managed service on top of some open source projects. Those open source projects are our first level of support and attention. Those ones need to be covered. Then everything underneath those go next, and then next. So instead of doing a pure technical prioritization, we do a business prioritization, which is also another way of taking a look at that over.
Perfect, thank you. We're course correcting a little bit again. I'm curious, maybe especially for the newly created ones, how do you measure whether or not your OSPO is successful? And how do those measurements sort of like line up with other things that we track across our company? Jan, do you want to start maybe?
I guess my answer would be pretty simple, as we just started our efforts in being an OSPO. So my first and foremost goal is like making operations easier. What I said before, removing barriers for the open source projects that we care about to get what they need to be successful. So probably providing, is it fair to call it business support in comparison to like their core efforts being software and documentation, whereas when they need to interoperate, collaborate, or build their community or whatever, that would be more like business support. That's what I'm heading for, and I know it's a bad indicator of success, but it's what I feel at this maturity level of our OSPO at this stage is most meaningful. And it will probably look totally different in half a year or a year. I'm eager to hear what
a follow-up
the other
on
ones.
this panel, right?
Yeah.
That said, we continue to track how efficient our processes are. You know, if people, so I think it's a really useful indicator to understand how we're doing as a team. If people are interested in contributing to open source or open sourcing their work, that we can respond to them without with transparency and reduce friction. And so something that we continue to track, as well as the number of people that are looking to do that, get involved in open source communities. And there's a lot of more subjective spaces that that you get a sense of your success, and that is everything from how many what is the external comms around a certain releasing of open source project, or are we able to speak at certain conferences about some of our work? Has it attracted and retained top talent? These are all things that we're paying attention to as well, and see them as markers of success, or and help us to be accountable on the OSPO team.
I'll just add on our side, one of the biggest challenges we have, whether I don't think it's a specific metric, but it's how many people understand where to get help, know where the documentation is, know that policies and processes exist to support them, know that there's people they can reach out to, like our CHAMPS program. And very informally, we run a survey every year, which continues to show us that there's a lot of people that still don't know that there's a CHAMPS program that can ask for help, or where a number of things. So that's one that I guess it's reach, but for us it's hard to show the impact of reach, but it's certainly the more people feel connected to and part of the internal community, the more likely they are to kind of engage with those things early. We're also thinking about working also over in the CHAOS OSPO area. There is, how do we help the people releasing, contributing to, and using open source, increase the quality of that work. And so we've, someone mentioned the OpenSSF scorecard criticality. That we're trying to look at what is the absolute baseline of metrics that we would want people to be starting to evaluate in their work, and then start to track, did they make changes based on this information? And maybe there's something in the future there for us that we're working on. So there's kind of that can people are people connected to the things that they need and that we're building for them, and is that something that's right in front of them that they know supports them? And then also helping them be better in their work. Those are the metrics that we're starting to work on. Even things so there's the security piece, but also, has everyone in a maintainer role taken the code of conduct training course? And that's under a safety metric. And as we get into more of a growth mindset, what is the contributor experience? And here's a survey you can run, and just kind of starting to roll out ways that people can improve their projects and track them. So I think there's something there where we're investing in that as well, just as a sharing thing.
We do a yearly, state of open source at Bloomberg survey as well, and it would be really interesting to compare surveys to see what are the things that were. That's an excellent question that I never thought of adding. Do you know where to go if you have questions for open source? That would be a really interesting question to track over time.
And do you feel part of the community at Microsoft, the open source community internally, all the different people? And the answers to that are really interesting too, because the more that people feel like they belong, to this journey and belong to, contributing to us doing open source better and being better stewards, and I think the more we're able to move forward.
That's really good.
New working group. New survey working
Ever
group.
more working groups is good. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're at the end of the time that was given to us. I know that between us, we would be able to talk about this for hours, but instead we'll have to take it to the GitHub discussions, because there's many more questions about dependencies, about processes, about all of this sweet stuff. So I'm gonna head it back to Anna and